I'm the author of www.getyourchildintoget.com. Welcome back to Test Prep 202, the verbal section. In the first part, I motivated what we're going to do, and I provided an outline of the short-term approach. I consider this extremely valuable and at least half of the key to success. In this part, I'm going to cover the verbal section in a lot more detail. So let's start by looking at a sentence completion question. Which one of these things would you need to flip a hamburger? That would be the question. If your child is very young, the proctor would read that question twice to your child, followed by 4 pictures. Spatula, tongs, picture of a chef, a cow. Okay, so why is this a bad example? Well, there's not a lot of thinking going on. In fact, it's one step almost, and it's almost a vocabulary quiz. There's no working memory requirements, or very little. Simple English vocabulary questions, as I mentioned. However, practicing a question like this can prevent disasters when you find out that your child has their own idea about how they want to take the test. Let's look at a better example. Which one of these would be least helpful to a doctor's assistant in an on-site crisis? Okay, the 4 answer choices are scalpel, triage room, defibrillator, stat sheet. And yes, I just totally made up this question. So first of all, this question has a working memory requirement. In fact, I think it's got the gold standard of working memory, which is 3 buckets. Least helpful, doctor's assistant, on-site crisis. So when your child reads that question, these 3 concepts have to go into working memory while they're worked on. There's a bit of logic here with least helpful, which is a negation of helpful, and a lot more reasoning, putting together assistant, on-site, and crisis to evaluate the answer set. There are synonyms, which are much more challenging and more powerful than opposites, and some ambiguity with each of these words. So is the assistant a nurse, or is the assistant a caddy for a golf outing? Is the crisis some dystopian event that has filled up the hospital, or did this doctor get paired with their biggest rival for a 3 p.m. tea time and it's now 2:45? And then, of course, what is this stat sheet? I'm assuming it's a patient stat sheet, but it could be golf stats. And then we've got to look at exactly what's happening here, because very few children would be at this level of vocabulary anyway. But regardless of the level, challenge has to be there. And if you're working with the appropriate material, your child's probably at a 50% error rate or higher. So let's take a look at the gap list. I get a lot of questions from recent immigrants whose child has spent less than a year in an English environment. So it could be just quantity of vocabulary. It could be in the process of picking up vocabulary. Time hasn't been taken to dig into synonyms. Opposites usually come quickly, but I think synonyms are a much bigger deal. Is it their ability to reason, right? Manipulate logic and vocabulary for the proper outcome? More often than not, there's a working memory issue going on. And then, of course, if you've got problems in one or more of these areas, they sort of work together against your child. So these are specific to the vocabulary questions. Specific to taking a test, does your child hurry through the question in a sloppy manner without considering the properties of each word, the context, the alternative meanings, even though you've told your child 100 times, take your time and read the answer at least twice? Does your child always pick the word banana when it appears and then come up with some goofy, convoluted explanation as to why it's banana? And I'm not kidding you, that was my son's biggest problem. It could be your child likes to pick the first answer every time. It could be anything. And again, practice tests help you suss that out before the test. Is the child not checking the answer before beginning to solve the problem? Okay, do we have an impatient parent who never gives the child enough time to think? And I don't mean just during test practice. I mean walking down the street asking the child questions. Do we have a demanding parent hovering with a frown of expectation? Like, you know these words, you've gotten this right before, you're seeing it again a week later, I expect you to get it right. I'm actually talking about myself, but I see this in other parents, and it's not good for test prep. So these first 4 problems we need to work on, especially in this video series. The next 3 are generalized test prep. Practice tests help with this, or really hard material that requires the child to pick up these skills is good. And of course, the last 2 are coaching issues and the growth of a parent into a academic coach. Now, word analogies and classification are basically, I can take this question and rearrange it into either an analogy or a classification problem. And you're going to see that when we start picking apart these words. You already have most of the tools for the test question. When I covered figure matrices, I did so because I think it was exemplary of the way to approach a cognitive skills problem. And then, of course, if you're just learning how to be a coach, your child is just learning the best practices, I recommend you do a figure analogy question where it's much easier to work on those test-taking skills or improve your coaching abilities, and then jump into an analogy problem next. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up here, and then we're going to go right into short-term strategies, which I'm willing to bet 70% of you need right away. We'll pick it up there in the next part. Thank you.